Joseph Smith once said, "A religion that does not require the sacrifice of all things never has power sufficient to produce faith necessary unto life and salvation." You know, Joseph likely learned this as a young boy, where the Smith family would experience this truth firsthand on the Connecticut River Valley. I'm sitting right here on the banks of the Connecticut River. To my left over here is Dartmouth College. To my right is Norwich, where the Smith family spent 5 long years. They came here in 1811, and they had all the world's goods they needed. By this time they had a good home, they had a business, they had money, and within the next 5 years they lost everything. But because of this trial, they gained a sure knowledge of God, that they were being led by Him. And this is their story. This is the story of the Connecticut Valley Covenant. You know, and it actually happened 8 years ago. Lucy had contracted tuberculosis. This was down in Tunbridge. And the doctors had given her up for dead, and she had survived a tumultuous night where she seemed to be within both sides of the veil. And the doctors even told her husband Joseph that he needed to say his goodbyes to her. She said then that she covenanted with God that if He would, quote, let me live, I would endeavor to get that religion that would serve Him right. She then heard the voice of the Lord that assured her that she would live. And her mother came in and said, "Lucy, you're getting better." And Lucy said, "Yes, I made a covenant with God that if I would serve Him and take care of you and my family, that He would let me live." So later in 1811, the Smith moved here to Lebanon, New Hampshire, in the Connecticut River Valley, and they felt very prosperous. At this point, they started working towards their retirement so they could improve their situation. But the Lord had other plans. In the next 5 years, they suffered a business failure, a life-threatening epidemic that lasted a year, and finally successive crop failures due to a catastrophic weather condition. The most difficult trial, obviously, was the typhus epidemic that spread down the Connecticut River and saw 1 out of 5 people die in the first 5 months alone. That was 6,400 people that died in the first 5 months. And it hit each of the Smith children, and Sophronia was believed to have died, and then she was brought back to life by the prayers and faith of the Smith family and sheer determination of Mother Smith. When the doctors had worked on Sophronia for so long, they just said, it's over, she's going to die. And then when she did stop breathing, her own family said, "Lucy, Sophronia is dead, you need to give her up." And she knew the covenant that she had made with God. So she went over into the corner with Joseph, and they pled with the Lord to give them the life of their daughter. And miraculously, Sophronia started breathing again. So she was really brought back to life by the prayers and faith of the family, but really it was the sheer determination of Mother Smith that saved the life of Sophie. And perhaps the hardest hit was young Joseph. He was 7 years old, and the doctors had worked to break his fever, only to have an infection develop in his chest right here between his breast and his shoulder. And when they lanced the wound, a full quart of lymph fluid and pus was discharged. And the pain in his left shoulder, after they discharged it, shot down his left leg and left side into his tibia, and he cried out, "Oh, Father, how can I stand this pain?" So apparently the infection had become septic in his blood, and it was life-threatening, and it now had settled down into the tibia of his lower leg. And twice surgeons cut large gashes from the knee to the ankle to drain the infection and to relieve the pressure. The first time it was 8 inches, the next time it was 11 inches. Each time the wound started to heal, it allowed the new bone that was growing over the dead and diseased bone, that new bone started to crush the older bone, and that was what the excruciating pain was. So this pain was intense, and in Joseph's emaciated state, his life literally hung in the balance. So a council of surgeons by this time from Dartmouth were called, and they all urged amputation, but Lucy pled with them to save Joseph's leg, and Joseph also said, "I won't have my leg amputated." Now, this could have never happened to save his leg had it not been for a series of remarkable or really even miraculous circumstances that converged to save Joseph's leg and most possibly his life. Among the physicians was a man named Dr. Nathan Smith. He was a renowned surgeon and founder of Dartmouth Medical School here. And he was the only surgeon in the world who really had the knowledge and ability to perform this operation. It had not been performed anywhere else. He was supposed to have been teaching down at Yale, which is a few hundred miles to our south at the time, but he had family up in this area and they were sick. But really what was most remarkable about these circumstances was that the experimental surgery, as Dr. Smith called it, was so advanced that it would not be recognized as standard medical practice until over 100 years later, after World War I. This surgery was awfully excruciating, and young Joseph endured it without any anesthetic. Dr. Smith believed that if you had anesthetic, that you would not recover nearly as well. And he had much better success with people who did not take anesthetic, and so Joseph would not take any alcohol. So we all know the story. His father held him in his arms while they sent Joseph's mother out into the field to wait. As she was gone, Dr. Smith started to drill 3 large holes into Joseph's shin. And after he drilled those holes, he chiseled 9 large pieces of bone out of Joseph's leg. Joseph screamed uncontrollably, and his mother came in twice and was sent back out. She records that the horror that she saw with blood on the bed and on the floor was too much for her to be able to handle. But Joseph was finally able to endure the operation. For 3 months, the doctor had told them they had to squeeze the muscle and the tissue area around that sore to work the blood in there and to help the wound heal. While that happened, another 14 sharp, bony pieces worked their way through the tissue and up to the surface of Joseph's leg, which also must have been excruciating. So, even though it took months for Joseph to heal, it really was through the prayers and faith of the Smith family that lives of both Joseph and Sophronia were saved. Mother Smith referred to this time as, quote, the year of affliction, disease, pain, and trouble. By now their finances are depleted. They were forced to move the family again to Norwich, Vermont, where they rented a house and started farming. Once again, circumstances tried their faith. The most catastrophic natural disaster in history, Mount Tambora, which was 12,000 miles away in Indonesia, erupted, and it spewed 25 miles of sulfur gases and debris into the stratosphere. It ejected a land mass the size of 3 miles long by 1 mile wide and half a mile deep into outer space. This debris that was just ejected into the atmosphere completely blocked the sunlight in the northern hemisphere for nearly a full year, and it destroyed any hope of raising crops, not only in 1816, but in the following, or 1815, but 1816 as well. So finally in 1816, after successive crop failures, the Smith family was forced again to move, this time to Palmyra, New York. And they had lost everything, all of their worldly goods. But what they gained in return was really priceless. Now they had the sure knowledge that God had heard their prayers and had delivered them. They had been purified in the fire of affliction, and they knew that wherever they would go, He would be leading them. And that's what a covenant really is. It is the price we pay to come to know our God. When we know with surety that He loves us, we are willing to do anything that He requires, because suddenly the cares of this world are swallowed up in the hope and knowledge of a better one with Him. And that's what the Smith family gained in the Connecticut River Valley. A covenant so great that it would sustain them through the greater trials that they would shortly have to face. I'm Dan Adams with the Joseph Smith Sr. and Lucy Mack Smith Family Association. You've been listening to the Connecticut Valley Covenant, a Smith Family podcast.